Twitch and YouTube.
Yeah.
Because like I feel like a lot of people would have used it for their events, but instead they like used other software.
True.
I don't know if you guys use it, but like I always used to use StreamYard. I've used it as well.
No, we've always used YouTube and YouTube. Sorry, Zoom and YouTube.
Oh, yeah. StreamYard basically like basically like a small Zoom call where like people join and then like you can like go onto the stage and talk and like use the stage and like it's really cool.
That's cool.
And they like give it for free to have a bunch of stuff.
Alrighty, I'm gonna start. This presentation shouldn't be too long, but thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope the hackathon is going well for you guys. So this is the accessibility and tech workshop. The room number is wrong. It's 6.302. And the recording will be available at Freetail Hackers on the YouTube channel. So the first thing is I'm Shristi. I'm one of the co-leads or presidents for Freetail Hackers this year. Freetail Hackers, if you don't already know, hosts hackathons twice a year, and you're at the spring hackathon right now. I'm a junior computer science major and a disability studies minor, which is why this workshop is something I've been really wanting to do, and hope that you get to take something away from it. We'll keep it informal so that you guys can ask questions. We can think about some problems that are happening in industry right now, and kind of come up with some solutions if you want to include it part of your hackathon. And a fun fact that I haven't changed is that, yeah, I love to sing, but I'm like super off pitch. So if you get in the car with me and I put on a song, sorry, I'm like not giving you a choice. I'll just start singing and you just have to deal with it. And that's me. So yeah, this workshop, we can like have it very interactive. I didn't like purposely put any content on the slide so that we can like actually like think about the problems that we're having rather than just like read it off. So the first thing is like when you think about like accessibility or the word accessibility, do we have like some like key terms that come up to our mind first? Anyone? Yeah.
Making sure like people who are colorblind or slightly colorblind can see the pages.
Yeah, so to reiterate, it's like if you're colorblind, like do you want to be able to see the pages, right? So for example, if I'm red-green colorblind and I use a lot of red-green colors, I won't be able to see the page properly, right? There's also like full color blindness where like you can see like yellow or blue or other colors. And so everything becomes a grayscale for you and it becomes super hard to read the website, right? And like what's another thing we can think about like accessibility? Any other ideas? So like something that like for me is like accessibility, you think about it usually in terms of disabilities, right? Where like something's like offset from the normality of like what we think, but like think about it this way. You are watching a show or a movie in a different language, right? What is the best thing that makes that show accessible for us? Subtitles, right? Now imagine you're deaf and you can't watch the show and you are an English speaker. What helps you? Subtitles, right? If you didn't know, subtitles actually came from the deaf community and it got translated into the international community for translation purposes, right? And I think most of us now watch shows or TVs that might be in different languages or even in the same language and have subtitles, right? So accessibility doesn't just mean that you have to be disabled per se, right? And disabilities is not also a bad thing. Being disabled becomes worse because we can't even provide people with disabilities access to normal things, right? Like no one in this room is normal. We all are different in some way. We might all have some condition that's happening, right? And we all need certain circumstances and understanding to make our things work for other people. So we can do that same thing in technology. And so disabilities and thinking about disabilities is just as important about thinking about human rights because disability rights and accessibility is a basic human right? So some of the problems that we're having right now, as John pointed out, is like color blindness, right? Like making sure that screens are readable. So let's say I'm colorblind, I cannot see any color. What is something in the website that I can do to make this like more accessible as a colorblind person? Contrast, yeah. Like really dark light contrast is very easy to see, right? What's another thing? Like if I have all white slides, then I'm like a professor, right? With all white slides, what kind of like and the text is all black, right? What kind of things help to point out like more important things? Bold, italics, underline, font sizes, and just like different alignment as well, like bullet lists, right? Like we know that whatever is the most left indented is more important than the sub information sometimes, right? Or the sub information is adding more details and context. So you can do the same thing when you're creating apps and websites. You can start thinking about, okay, even if my thing is based on color, how can I make this so that people who can see color can also access the website, right? In a way that is still aesthetically pleasing. And you can do it. You just have to think about it more, right? If I am deaf, I would love to have something with subtitles, right? But for those of you who don't know, people who are deaf, their first language is not English. Their first language is ASL or some kind of sign language most of the time, right? And so having some kind of translative service that can translate like text or videos into sign language on the side is super helpful. I don't know if you guys know, but in India, news channels have ASL, or not ASL, but like sign language interpreters at the bottom left of the screen for any news presentation, right? And you don't even think about, like, you don't even pay attention to it if you don't need it, right? But for those people who do need it, they don't even have to go out of their way to ask. They're like, okay, I can still get my news because it's in sign language and I can access it now, right? Another problem that's happening is like, if we look at like website example, like I could pull up infinite number of websites that are not accessible, right? And you can see a lot of problems with it. So the Coursera website, I'm sure a lot of you guys know Coursera. It's an education platform, right? It gives you online education, kind of a substitute to universities. If you look at this website from the very beginning, this is the homepage without zooming in, zooming out. The buttons are very small. Like I think for you guys, you can see it bigger because it's like on the screen, but like my 13-inch, the font text is probably a 0.10, maybe a 0.8, right? I know like if resumes have 0.8 or 0.10, like people cannot read it, right? And if you like keep going down, like important information is very small. The slides, this is kind of like weird. It doesn't have enough contrast of layer, right? It's an education company that is supposed to expand education, but you're not even considering people who need access to this education, right? Or like, let's look at another example. Like I looked up just brief search before this workshop, most accessible websites, okay? NIH.gov for the US was #1. And what do we get? A very inaccessible website. And I'll show you why. Because if you're on a tab, first of all, this has too many texts and too many links. For a person like me who is able and has the privilege to be able to navigate this website, I can't even, like, I have to spend 5 minutes reading through everything and understanding what's happening, right? Like, there's also like so many links coming out, it becomes a rabbit hole. And I love to work off of my keyboard, so I can't even like navigate between this page from just the keyboard. It's going to a different site, right? So I can't navigate between tabs. There are people who have a disability who can't really use a trackpad that properly or can't use a keyboard that properly, right? So it's important to make websites or apps or whatever you design screen accessible and screen readers so that a machine can go through the page, read it out for you, and you can command it where to go on the page, right? That's important. And this is ranked #1 in the most accessible. I can't even access it as an abled person. Like, this is how little we think about accessibility in the tech space. And this is why it's important to consider it, because when you treat accessibility as a side thing, you have to add 500 lines of code to fix it. When you think about accessibility from the very beginning and design it, you're writing less code, you're making it more accessible, and you don't have to worry about fixing your mistake. You're bringing it into your mindset from the very beginning, right? And that's important. Yeah, and so those are like some problems. I could like go on a tangent of how many problems we have. Okay, I've been talking about websites and apps. Let's take assistive technology, right? For those of you who don't know, assistive technology is technology that is used by people who need special accommodations to help them access things, right? So screen readers, big source of assistive technology to help people go through websites and like navigate things, right? Some screen readers are not designed to be able to read HTML screens properly, right? So they can't even like read headers properly. Or these screen readers will be built without having people who have that disability testing these products out. They're not even developers on it, right? So think about it. I am a Hindi and English speaker, right? But let's say I'm designing someone who's speaking Japanese, for example, right? And I code my whole website in Japanese using Google Translate, hope it works out. And then a Japanese person comes up to me and they're like, I can't use this product, right? Well, I was the last person to be that should have been working on this product anyways, because I don't know anything about Japanese, right? It's not translatable. So as a developer or as someone in the community, you should acknowledge what privileges and knowledge bases you have and what you don't have. And what you don't have, how you can gain access to those resources to be able to create something that is for more people or for everyone, right? Yeah. So disability needs. So specifically, we've talked about like in the lens of disability and being abled and how like I personally can't access some things and maybe you can't access some things, right? One of the key disabilities we talked about was like color blindness and deafness. What are some other disabilities that we like don't consider? We're struggling to think of it, like any example. People who can't speak. Yeah, nonverbal communicators. What else? Down syndrome, maybe? You can do more obvious ones that like you see them on the street and you know that they have a disability, right? People who might not have like limbs, right? I don't know, like you have invisible disabilities. People who look completely normal on the outside and might be going through hell on the inside, right? Like all of those needs, and I get it, are like infinite and it's hard to cater to every single need, right? And so that makes creating accessible projects very hard, because if you try to consider every single need, then you start to exclude people who would also need it, right? But right now we're excluding the whole disabled population. Like it doesn't matter what kind of disability you have, you're just excluding them, period. But when you consider disability needs and you're considering your product, you want to consider what are the kind of people that I want to target this at, right? Does this mean that I would need to create a separate assistive technology for certain demographics, right? And that's okay too. It should be part of your product planning. If you want to make something that is at least accessible by 60, 70% of the population, right? You should also consider, okay, what's a side product that can raise it up to 80, 90%, right? So for example, if you guys might not know, who here has played games with like Microsoft Connect? You have. I'm sure a couple of us are like I don't know, Just Dance, like playing with the Connect. Have you guys noticed that we don't have to use controllers on the Connect? Like it's very different from other gaming systems because you're not hands-on with it. It was actually created as an assistive technology. So the Connect was created so that people who cannot use their limbs can still be part of the gaming environment and be included or access things without touching it physically, right? You see this example with like Iron Man, where like he also like moves things and does things without like really like touching it, right? Like he verbalizes with the computer and it works, right? And like he wasn't even disabled, right? But the product itself considered like, okay, here, if a person is disabled, like how can they access it? So the Connect was actually made for people with disabilities and now is one of the largest gaming technologies that is available for everyone to use, right? So I get it, it's hard to take into account all disability needs, but if you're the one person in the room that is even thinking about one disability need and you're programming something, you're already making a really big difference, because people who with disabilities are tired of saying that they need stuff and that they need accommodations. And it's time that we as able people can also recognize that. Okay. So industry culture, how do they treat disabilities? They kind of treat it the same way as the government, that it's not really needed. It's a small minority of the population. We don't really have to worry about it, right? I can bring up the stats, but it's like pretty bad. Like, I don't know, disability demographic. 15% of the world population has some kind of disability. That's like over 1 billion people. And then 61 million adults in the US have a disability. It is not as small of a proportion of minority that you think that actually exists, right? You will make more money out of something if you can make it accessible than by just catering to the wide majority, right? You can take race, for example. If everything was catered towards white, straight, heterosexual, old men, how many of us would not be able to access those products, right? Like take, for example, Siri or Alexa or Google Play. If you have an ethnic accent of some kind, especially if you're a person of color, these devices cannot recognize your commands. My parents cannot talk to Siri. They cannot talk to Alexa, and they are abled people. Their only fault is that they are a person of color. And even while being a person of color and programming these technologies, you are going with the white frame and my ideology of coding it. So you do it with an American white accent that's Caucasian. So you program it for that, but you don't account for your own race, your own people, and much less the people who also want to access it. So that's industry culture. And it is a sad reality, and they go off of profit. But again, you can make profit while still being accessible if you think about it in the first place. So milestones, I talked about Microsoft. So if you go to Microsoft, assistive technologies page, they have like a whole thing on it. So vision, hearing, neurodiversity or autism, learning, mobility, mental health. Let's say, anyone pick up any one of these categories? Mental health, sure. That's something I think all of us have had problems with, right? No?
No, I mean, yeah, but you didn't have to say it.
I mean, the first part of breaking stigma is
All
talking
right, okay,
about
okay,
it.
I got you.
Okay, Windows 11, let's see what it says. Inclusively designed to support productivity, creativity, and ease of use with people with disabilities. Robust set of built-in and third-party accessibility features. Let's look into more. Vision. Screen reading features in Windows make it easy to personalize your viewing experience or skip them entirely. You can see every detail without a strain. You can distinguish colors. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can make the PC for itself. And look, when you zoom in, the ratios aren't that bad. Like they still make sense, right? Hearing, audio, Cortana, you can like voice navigate, right? All of these things, we take it for granted because we're like, why would you not have this? Like, it's so obvious, right? But you had to fight for it. And Microsoft with Satya Nadella and Satya Nadella's history with disabilities does a really good job as an industry leader of showing what you can make like powerful technology with accessibility in mind, right? And then there's a lot of like startups that also do this. So assistive technology companies, right? You'll get a ton of companies and there's a lot of startups that are working in it, right? And it's not like people are not thinking about it. So we have had industry milestones. We are getting better, right? For example, I showed you Coursera's website, but one thing they do really well that is also easy for us to do in like an industry level is creating like wrapper files that are like defined for certain CSS HTML formats that are accessible, right? And those all wrap automatically around every single file that you create, right? So any front-end development, this wrapper file goes around in production, and it forces all of the widgets to be a certain way, following this format, right? It's not the best solution, but it is an industry scalable solution, right? And it is happening in industry. People do have like templates and formats, right? And what I'm saying is we can start by doing that. We can start by being aware, and we can start by also doing more, right? And like this is a topic where like you can go so much more in depth into it. And so what can we do? Like I said, being aware is the first thing. If you come out of this workshop and you still go and develop the same way, I am not going to blame you. It is totally okay. It's a hackathon. Do what you want, right? But I hope you come out of this workshop and you come up with like, when you're developing something, whether it be today or later on, be like, am I really making something that is helpful for people, or am I just doing something because it gives me money at the end of the day, right? Like, am I doing it for a job, or can I do it for a job and help people along the way, right? Even if it's like you don't voice it, if that 1% in your voice comes in like, hey, think about what it means to be accessible after this workshop, I'll be happy, right? What you can materially do and like act like do in like a more definitive way is like you can start having these conversations. You can start having like changing your format to like be like, okay, no, let's think about how we can be accessible, right? How do we make less buttons? How do we make it user navigation? How do we make it keyboard navigation? And think about it from the design process, so you don't have to go back and write 500 lines of code to make tabs accessible just by keyboard within the same page, right? And if you guys want a really good example, let me show you guys this. The White House page is one of the most accessible websites in the US. And that's because if you look at it, it's very simply designed. You can tell where everything is. It is currently in the large font size. If I toggle it off, it looks like a pretty normal website, but the contrast is very clear, right? Even if I cannot see these colors, first of all, it's black on white, blue on white. You can underline it, you can bold it, you can have different sizes, the pictures around it, there's a high contrastive layer, you can easily read it, right? The White House has buttons on their website that can make it more accessible. Look, you can toggle contrast on, and it makes it even easier to read it. White on black, yellow on black. And you can do large font. And this might look too big for us, but maybe somebody with low vision needs it, right? What if we're 70 one day and we can't read anything? We need this feature, right? So this is a super good example of like how they designed their website with accessibility in mind, with toggles, right? Do you guys see like what improvement that they could make? Yeah. Yeah, the buttons could be bigger, right? And there could be like arrows pointing to it initially and be like, click here if you need it to be more accessible or screen readable, right? So there's a lot that can be done, but I think we're already making a good step by all of you guys coming to this workshop. And then incorporating the hackathon. Let's say you come out, you make a web page. If you make your headers like different sizes and different fonts and stuff, that's a win, right? If you make it contrastive, that's a win. If your app does something about disability rights and accessibility, that's also a win, right? I could come up with a list for you. You could do one minor thing, you could do 10 things. There's no scale. Everything that you do is right. Taking that small step is right? So that was my workshop. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys learned something from it. If you guys have questions, let me know.